I put it to you, you that is watching me right now, that if your pastor has private jet, universities, is living larger than life, has investment across the globe, he or she is most likely a There's no way, because there's no way a pastor will not preach Christ and not lie. The truth of the gospel is Christ. Anything outside the gospel, anything outside Christ is a lie. It's manipulation. Maybe you know about Kenneth Copeland, one of the richest pastors in America. That guy has been sentenced to life in prison. And my problem is not even him. You need to hear the victim impact statement. That means those he has deceived. Imagine, goodness, an old woman who took all her savings to his church because of his preaching, because of his messages. And today she's living in poverty, and so many of them.
Kenneth Copeland, one of America's wealthiest and most controversial televangelists, was sentenced to life imprisonment today after a stunning trial that exposed decades of financial fraud and tax evasion. The 87-year-old founder of Kenneth Copeland Ministries showed no emotion as Judge Martin Reynolds delivered the maximum sentence, effectively ending the preacher's empire that once spanned continents and reached millions of followers worldwide. The case against Copeland began 3 years ago when a former financial officer at Kenneth Copeland Ministries turned whistleblower, providing federal investigators with thousands of documents detailing what prosecutors called the largest religious fraud scheme in American history. Michael Thornton, who had served as deputy financial controller for the ministry for 14 years, secretly copied financial records, offshore account details, and internal communications before leaving the organization in 2020. "I couldn't be part of it anymore," Thornton testified during the trial. "Watching people send their last dollars while Mr. Copeland used their sacrificial giving to buy yet another jet or property, it broke me. I knew God was calling me to expose the truth, no matter the cost." The subsequent investigation by the IRS, FBI, and Department of Justice uncovered evidence that Copeland had personally diverted over $150 million in church donations to fund his lavish lifestyle, including his fleet of private jets, multiple mansions, and luxury vehicles. Bank records revealed that Copeland had spent $17.5 million on private aircraft in a single year, while claiming to donors that their funds were supporting missionary work and humanitarian efforts. Prosecutors demonstrated that Copeland had created an elaborate network of shell companies and offshore accounts to hide assets from the IRS. The ministry had established more than 30 separate entities across the Cayman Islands, Panama, and Liechtenstein that served no legitimate religious purpose, but functioned to obscure the flow of funds. Most damaging was evidence that he had instructed staff to falsify donation records and ministry expenses to maintain the organization's tax-exempt status while using the ministry as his personal bank account. The defendant didn't just blur the line between ministry funds and personal use, he erased it entirely. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Wilson told the jury. For Mr. Copeland, the ministry's bank accounts were his bank accounts. Donor dollars didn't go to spread the gospel, they went to spread his empire. The courtroom in Fort Worth, Texas, was packed with former followers throughout the trial, many of whom had donated significant portions of their life savings to Copeland's ministry after his promises that God would multiply their gifts. Some attendees openly wept as details of the fraud were described during the 7-week trial, particularly when prosecutors played videos of Copeland soliciting seed faith donations from financially vulnerable followers while flying between his numerous properties on ministry-funded private jets. One video from 2018 showed Copeland telling viewers, "The Lord said to me, 'Tell my people to give their best offering ever, and I will cancel their debts.'" Immediately following this broadcast, the ministry received over $20 million in donations, of which prosecutors proved $6 million went directly to purchasing a waterfront property in Florida under a shell company controlled by Copeland family members. The defendant preyed upon the faith and trust of thousands of sincere believers, said U.S. Attorney Caroline Marchand during her closing arguments. He exploited their religious devotion for personal gain while claiming divine approval for his actions. This case isn't about religious freedom, it's about fraud, plain and simple. Copeland's defense team, led by high-profile attorney James Morrison, had attempted to portray the case as government persecution of religious organizations. They argued that the luxurious lifestyle was necessary for Copeland's worldwide ministry, and that donors understood their contributions would support his work, including his travel needs. Morrison repeatedly cited the ministry's international reach and Copeland's need to travel as a representative of God's abundance. The prosperity gospel that Mr. Copeland preaches includes the belief that God rewards faithfulness with material blessings, Morrison told the court. His lifestyle was a testament to the very principles he espoused, and his followers understood this. These weren't secrets. The jets and properties were visible symbols of the success of his ministry and the truth of his teachings. This defense strategy collapsed when prosecutors presented recorded conversations between Copeland and his financial advisors discussing how to shield the jets from government busybodies and keep the real numbers away from the sheep, referring to his followers. In one particularly damning recording from 2017, Copeland could be heard laughing about a widow who donated her insurance payout, saying, "She thinks she's getting a heavenly return, but the only return is my new hangar." The prosecution also introduced internal emails directing staff to create fake mission projects for fundraising campaigns that had no actual operations. One email from Copeland to his son John instructed him to create some pictures of those African children we supposedly helped for a fundraising broadcast. Perhaps most devastating to the defense was testimony from former ministry insiders who described a culture of fear and secrecy within the organization. Sarah Williams, who worked as Copeland's personal assistant for 8 years, testified that staff were required to sign extensive non-disclosure agreements and were threatened with both legal action and divine punishment if they questioned financial practices. "He told us that questioning his spending was questioning God himself," Williams testified. "He said anyone who exposed ministry business would face God's wrath. We were all terrified, not just of losing our jobs but of eternal damnation." Williams described how staff members who raised concerns about financial irregularities were immediately terminated and branded as influenced by demonic forces. Former employees were often subjected to public condemnation during service broadcasts, with Copeland telling his audience that these individuals had aligned themselves with Satan to attack God's work. The prosecution also presented evidence that Copeland had knowingly solicited donations for disaster relief efforts and missionary work that were instead diverted to business ventures and property acquisitions. Bank records showed that less than 3% of funds raised for Hurricane Katrina victims ever reached relief organizations, while millions went to a real estate investment company owned by the Copeland family that purchased distressed properties in the affected areas. David Martinez, former director of international missions for the ministry, testified that he was instructed to create fictional reports about missionary activities that never occurred. "I was told to write detailed reports about schools and hospitals we had supposedly built in developing countries," Martinez said. "In reality, those projects didn't exist. When I expressed concern, Mr. Copeland told me, the donors need to feel good about giving. The details don't matter." The trial took an unexpected turn when Eagle Mountain International Church, the legal name for Copeland's primary ministry organization, attempted to distance itself from Copeland's actions. Church board members filed a motion claiming they had been unaware of the financial improprieties and should not be held liable for Copeland's individual actions. This move backfired when prosecutors produced board meeting minutes showing the members had repeatedly approved transactions, moving funds from ministry accounts to Copeland's personal control. Further investigation revealed that board members had received significant personal benefits, including luxury vehicles, all expense-paid vacations, classified as ministry retreats, and housing allowances, despite not having official ministerial duties. As the guilty verdict was read last week, Copeland remained stoic, occasionally leaning to whisper to his attorneys. His wife Gloria and other family members, who have been conspicuously absent from most of the proceedings, were not present for the verdict or today's sentencing. Sources close to the family indicated that significant tension had developed as various members sought to protect their own interests. During today's sentencing hearing, Judge Reynolds allowed impact statements from several former followers.
Now, that's the part one. If you listen to this point, how do you feel? Okay, in the part two, I'll bring the victim impact statement, the testimonies of those people that, trusted him so much. You don't want to miss it. If you like, get sense.